this is what Alyssa Thomas said. It's a huge advantage, like you said. We played, 2 years under White? Everything is pretty much the same stuff. Defense, offense, we know everything they're about to do. She stated we know everything they about to do. Now, we told you guys, Stephanie White and her assistants brought the Connecticut Sun offense to Indiana. That's why she's not letting Caitlin Clark play her game. She only knows one style of basketball, and it doesn't work for
Alyssa Thomas had a lot to say after Phoenix Mercury's win over Indiana, and when she said it, the entire basketball world went quiet, because what she said was not music, a rumor. It was not a hot take from a commentator who watched a few film sessions. It was a first-person lived-in account from a player who knows Stephanie White's system the way a student knows a textbook she has already passed the final exam on. And it blew the roof off everything.
Play against her, how much of an advantage is it to sort of have an understanding of what she likes to run on both sides of the ball?
A huge advantage. I mean, like you said, we played, 2 years? Everything's pretty much the same. So defense, offense, we know everything they're about to do.
Thomas told reporters without hesitation, without looking over her shoulder, without any music diplomatic cushion, that facing the Indiana Fever under Stephanie White was, quote, music a huge advantage. She said she played under White for 2 years with the Connecticut Sun, and then she said it, everything is pretty much the same stuff. Defense, offense, we know everything they're about to do.
I think it's time for you Stephanie White loving supporters, apologists. I think it's time for y'all to admit that this sports talk is right. She gotta go. She gotta go. We lose the same way every time, but this time they lost really bad. Everybody was bad. Every single player was bad tonight. Every single player. But you know what's the worst?
That is not a polite critique wrapped in coaching speak. That is a professional athlete in a post-game interview telling Music the World that her former head coach's playbook is so frozen in time that players who left her system years ago can still predict every single call she's going to make before the ball even moves. Every screen, every defensive rotation, every set plays out of a timeout. Alyssa Thomas had already seen the whole movie. She knew the ending before tip-off, and the Indiana Fever with Caitlin Clark on their roster never had a chance.
Thomas as a hub is all the same damn thing, bro. Stephanie White is to blame, bro. This is what Alyssa Thomas said, bro. This is what Alyssa Thomas said, bro.
And the result of Thomas knowing everything White was going to do, the Mercury dismantled Indiana by 35 points. Alyssa Thomas put up a triple-double. This is not coincidental. When a defender already knows which side the ball handler is being music pushed toward, when she already knows which corner the off-ball cutter is going to occupy, when she has already seen the offensive set so many times that her feet are moving before the play is called, the other team is not playing basketball anymore. They are executing a drill. Indiana was running plays that Thomas had practiced against in Connecticut. The Fever scheme, the same system White used with the Sun, became the Mercury's greatest weapon against them. Think about the absurdity of that. The coach's own system, unchanged and unevolving, handed the other team a tactical map to a decisive blowout victory.
I just thought they were the hungrier team. I thought that they played with a relentless, effort, a relentless pursuit to get to what they wanted, to be disruptive on defense, to get to their spots on offense. I thought their competitive spirit was better than ours.
And Caitlin had 3 assists in the first 3 minutes of the game, then both her and Aaliyah checked out, I think.
Stephanie White has heard all of this before. She is not oblivious to the critiques. And every time the questions arrive about her schemes, about her sideline demeanor, about her relationship with Caitlin Clark, she reaches for the same set of responses. She talks about competition. She talks about how these things happen in every locker room. She says the tension is normal, that it is not a story, that the attention only exists because of who Caitlin Clark is and how many clicks her name generates. After the Fever's loss to the Portland Fire on June 1st, where Clark was held to just 6 points, and the team dropped by 16, White stood at the podium and gave you the version of accountability that is not actually accountability. She acknowledged the shooting struggles. She acknowledged that things need to change. And then she walked away without addressing the fundamental question that everyone with eyes was asking. Why does this team look structurally the same, regardless of the opponent, regardless of the score, regardless of what the game is telling you needs to happen? Because while White was dismissing the conversation as media noise, the footage from that Portland game was telling a different story entirely. There was Clark on the bench during a timeout, visibly shaking her head. There she was, standing behind White, her body language broadcasting everything that was being left unsaid at every podium. This was not a player disagreeing with one call on one possession. This was a player who has been watching the same predictable system run into the same walls, game after game, and who has increasingly fewer ways left to hide the frustration that comes with being the most gifted offensive player in the sport, and being deployed inside a scheme that her own former teammates can scout in their sleep. Caitlin Clark could average 40 points a game if the system around her was built to unlock what she actually does best. Instead, Indiana is running Connecticut Sunsets from 3 seasons ago, and the rest of the league has the answer. Kate hand off Clark for the tie.
Hand off Clark for the tie. Yes! Caitlin Clark has tied the game with under 2 seconds left to play. 22 has done it again.
Here is the part of this story that makes the tactical stagnation hurt the most. Caitlin Clark is not struggling because she lacks the ability. The evidence of what she is capable of runs in every direction you look. Earlier this season against the Washington Mystics, she put this team on her back in the fourth quarter and personally dragged Indiana back from a 9-point deficit. 5 music 3-pointers in the final period. 32 points, 8 assists. She hit the game-tying shot with 1 seconds left on the clock to force overtime. That is not a player who is declining. That is not a player who is confused music or out of form. That is a generational talent performing at exactly the level you would expect a generational talent to perform in spite of the system around her. Not because of it. When Clark catches fire, she can overcome any scheme, any defensive game plan, any structural limitation. But basketball games are 40 minutes, not 4. And you cannot live on fourth-quarter heroics music while your playbook is being handed to the opposition by their coaching staff before the opening tip.
Caitlin, reminder you guys, had 17 points in the fourth quarter and she had 5 threes in the fourth quarter. That is unheard of. This bothered me so much. Like, this stopped me in my tracks. I was like, wow. Of all things, you have a player in Caitlin Clark who played 13 games last season. She has talked about how hard that was on her mentally, how hard that was on her trying to battle back from these injuries. She was in a shooting slump last season. The first 2 games, she was also in a shooting slump. Everybody's saying she's washed, she's not as good, she's overhyped, calling her Jeremy Lin, all of this kind of stuff. And she goes off in the fourth quarter and she's the only reason that you are in this game. She was the reason. She made that 3 with 2 seconds left on the clock to tie up the score that ultimately sent them into overtime. That was Caitlin Clark who hit that 3. She does all of this, and you have a chance. You have a chance.
And what did Stephanie White do with that performance? She stood at the microphone and she talked about the team. She talked about effort. She redirected the conversation. She highlighted other players, every phrase in the coaching handbook that allows you to say something without actually saying the one thing the entire building needed to hear was deployed in sequence. The player who just hit the most important shot of your season in a nationally broadcast game could not get a direct, unambiguous music. Caitlin Clark was brilliant tonight from her own head coach. Now layer that on top of Alyssa Thomas, confirming on camera that White's system has not changed. Now layer that on top of the viral sideline footage. The bench exchanges the 35-point blowout in which Thomas exploited her former coach's predictability to get a triple-double. You are not looking at isolated incidents anymore. You are looking at a coherent, consistent, and deeply troubling portrait of a coaching environment that is actively working against the most important player on its roster.
In the fourth quarter, particularly when it comes to Caitlin, I think she made 5 threes in that fourth quarter, more than her first 2 games combined. So just your thoughts on the resilience from her.
I thought our whole group showed resilience, in that rally. We showed the ability to make tough shots. We had some really good time and score execution moments, offensively and defensively, in those moments. We just have to have more.
This is the basketball argument stripped to its foundation. Coaching is not about loyalty to a system. Coaching is about reading what your players need, reading what the opponent is giving you, and making adjustments that keep defenses from getting comfortable. The greatest coaches in the history of this sport are not great because they found one system that worked and ran it until the league caught up. They are great because they evolved. They built around their best players instead of forcing their best players to survive inside schemes designed for different rosters, different eras, different personnel. When you have Caitlin Clark, a player whose shooting range extends the floor in ways most coaches have never had the privilege of working with you build toward that. You create the conditions for what she does to flourish. You make her gravity the centerpiece of everything. Indiana is not doing that. Indiana is running the Connecticut Sun playbook with a player who should have the most sophisticated offensive system in the WNBA designed around her. And Alyssa Thomas just confirmed on national record that she already knows exactly what that playbook says.
Get easier for the Indiana Fever, man. It's not. I saw the schedule. They're playing Atlanta Dream. Atlanta Dream is actually playing some good basketball. And I'm telling you, I think the Fever fan base will explode if they lose that game. I'm telling you. They got to win that game. If not, they're going to, I'm telling you, the whole entire fan base is going to go bonkers. And they're going to probably revolt because Stephanie White. I never seen such a self-serving coach in my whole entire life. This is really bad. You know, coaches are supposed to put the players first, not themselves. But it just seems like she put herself first a lot. She never takes blame, never takes accountability.
There is something important to understand about what Alyssa Thomas's quote actually means in competitive terms. She was not just shading her former coach for the sake of a headline. She was explaining a tactical reality with direct consequences for every team Indiana faces this season. If Thomas knows White's schemes that thoroughly, and she played in them for 2 years, she knows every defensive coverage, every offensive set, every counter White reaches for when the primary option breaks down, then every coaching staff in the WNBA has the same advantage. They watch film. They talk to players who have been in the system. They run the same game plan every time they face the Fever because the Fever keep giving them the same look. Indiana is not an unpredictable opponent. Indiana is a team that other teams circle on the schedule because they know exactly what they are getting. And at the center of all that predictability, carrying more offensive responsibility than any player in the league music, is Caitlin Clark, fighting scheme limitations that no player at her level should have to fight in the middle of what should be the prime years of her career.
What's hurting us right now is we're only playing one defensive scheme, and in this league, it's too good. You can't, and people are going to pick us apart. And so, we got to dial in. We got to focus. Your IQ has to be on point. You have to know what schemes we're doing, and if you can't do that, then you can't play. And that's the point where we're at right now.
When you say you're playing one defensive scheme, but you have others installed, you just aren't ready to run them in games?
I mean, we had probably 10 of them last year. Each team has stuff up their sleeve, but if you can't execute them, you can't do them. And so this team really does have to focus. We have a lot of young guns. We have a lot of people who are very talented. But at the same time, you have to dial in and know what we're doing. Otherwise, it just...
Fans have been saying this for 18 months. The analysts have been circling it for 2 seasons. And now, an actual insider, a player who ran Stephanie White's plays, who sat in Stephanie White's film sessions, Music, who lived inside the system for 2 years in Connecticut, has gone on record and confirmed what everyone watching already knew. The schemes are stale. The playbook has not evolved. And the Indiana Fever, with one of the most transcendent basketball talents the sport has ever produced, in their starting lineup, are paying the price for it every single music night. This is not a coincidence. This is not bad luck. This is the direct, predictable, and entirely avoidable result of a coaching staff that has not grown, has not adapted, and has not built the kind of offensive infrastructure that Caitlin Clark's presence demands and deserves. The Indiana Fever do not have music a talent problem. Let that be crystal clear. They have a system problem. They have a leadership problem at the coaching level. And when Alyssa Thomas walks out of a post-game interview and casually explains that exploiting Stephanie White's playbook was not even a strategic challenge, that it was simply a matter of remembering what she already knew from 2 years ago, that is not just a critique of White's basketball philosophy. That is an indictment when a veteran player can sit in front of microphones after a dominant win and describe her former coach's scheme as something that has not changed at all. Offense, defense, everything. That is the kind of statement that front offices cannot ignore and fans will not forget. The question is no longer whether Stephanie White's approach is limiting this team.